Dust rolled off the prairie like pale smoke under a punishing sun, cicadas droning in the brittle grass, when Caleb McGraw reined in his sorrel, gelding at the sight of a lonely wagon sitting crippled on the trail, its axle snapped and one wheel lying several yards off like a broken limb. And there, crouched beside the splintered wood, was a young woman in a faded calico dress, head bowed, shoulders trembling as she tried to shield her tear-streaked face from the heat and the wind. Her bonnet lay in the dirt, crushed under her palm, as though she had tried to press her despair into the ground itself. And Caleb, a man more used to silence than company, felt something stir inside his chest, an ache, a memory of his own sister lost to the hardships of the frontier. So he dismounted slowly, boots crunching on the gravelly road, and spoke in a voice he barely recognized, low and steady like a creek in drought. "Ma'am, looks like trouble found you out here." She startled at the sound, eyes red but sharp as an eagle's as she turned to him, clutching a small bundle close, maybe a child's blanket or maybe all she owned. And for a heartbeat she didn't answer, only searched his face as though weighing the kind of man he was before letting him draw any closer. Then whispered, "The wheel. It broke miles back. My pa's gone ahead to fetch help. But it's been 3 days," and her words cracked like dry timber underfoot, telling him more than her lips did, that she'd been alone, maybe abandoned, maybe left with promises that had turned to dust in the wind. Caleb crouched near the wagon, fingers brushing the splintered axle, already thinking how he might fashion a brace from the spare boards tied to his saddle. But when he looked back at her, the sun caught the streak of her tears, and he saw in them a story too deep for the moment to hold. "Name's Caleb McGraw," he said quietly, tugging off his hat. "You're safe now, miss. Tell me what you need." She swallowed hard, drew herself up as though pride could hold her steady, and said, Sarah Kincaid, and I don't know what to do." The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint scent of rain far to the west, and Caleb knew the storm would be here by nightfall. If she stayed out here, she might not last another evening. He straightened, held out his calloused hand, the same hand that had hauled calves from the mud and buried friends beneath stony soil, and said, "Then take my saddle, Miss Kincaid. My horse can carry you while I fix your wagon, or we ride for the next town together. You don't have to face this road alone." For a moment she only stared at his hand, tears glinting on her lashes, as though the simple offer was more than she could bear. Then she reached out, small fingers trembling as they slipped into his palm. And in that touch Caleb felt the weight of her fear and her strength all at once. He lifted her gently to his horse, cinched her bundle to the saddle horn, and told himself this was just another kindness on a lonely trail. But deep down, he knew the trail ahead would not end at the next town. Something had shifted, and whatever story was beginning between them would not end easily. As the first far-off rumble of thunder rolled across the plains, Caleb tightened his hat against the wind, glanced up at Sarah perched uncertainly on his horse, and thought, maybe I was meant to ride this road today, meant to find her here. The prairie stretched endless, but for the first time in years it did not feel empty. Rain came down in slanted sheets before dawn, drumming on the wagon boards like 1,000 hooves, and Caleb McGraw rose from where he had huddled beneath the canvas flap, his coat soaked but his rifle dry, scanning the horizon, while Sarah Kincaid dozed, curled on his bedroll, her pale face softened by exhaustion and trust. Sometime in the night she had confessed between shivers that her father had not gone ahead for help at all, but had vanished with their last coins after a heated quarrel about land and debts, leaving her stranded on the prairie with a broken wagon and a heart full of shame. And Caleb, hearing the story, had felt the old iron of anger in his blood at the kind of men who used and abandoned. And though he said little, he had banked the fire inside him like a coal, vowing that she would not be left alone again on his watch. By mid-morning the storm rolled east, leaving a washed-clean sky and a wind that smelled of wet sage. Caleb rigged a brace for the axle with timber from a dead cottonwood, and patched the wagon enough to roll, while Sarah gathered her few belongings with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been disappointed too often to waste words. They moved together like two people who had known each other longer than a day, he lifting, she tying knots, both glancing at the horizon where the telegraph poles marched toward the next town like sentinels. And as they worked, she told him about the little brother buried back in Missouri, the dream of a farm her mother had whispered about. The way she had imagined the West would be a place of promise rather than hardship. Caleb listened, thinking of his own unfulfilled promises, of the homestead he had once tried to build with his late wife before fever took her, and something in Sarah's voice threaded through his grief like a needle, sewing torn cloth. By afternoon, the wagon creaked forward again. Sarah perched on the bench, while Caleb walked beside the horse, his hand on the reins, scanning for trouble. They had gone less than 5 miles when a shadow rose on the horizon, 3 riders angling toward them from the south, dust pluming behind. Caleb's instincts flared. He slipped his rifle from its scabbard and told Sarah in a low voice to keep the horse steady. The riders drew near, rough-faced men with drooping hats and eyes that had seen too much whiskey, and the tallest called out a greeting that did not sound like a greeting at all. Caleb stepped forward, blocking their path, his voice calm but edged with steel. What happened next would test every ounce of grit he had, and would reveal a courage in Sarah Kincaid she herself had not known she possessed.